Howdy, and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. My name is Will Stone. He is Chase Caldwell. We hope you all had a very happy Thanksgiving. Chase is good to have you back with us. I know you're not feeling the greatest right now, so appreciate you playing hurt and playing through injury and getting back on here.
Yeah, minor setback for major comeback. I'm glad to be back. I've missed the last few weeks, I guess, and it is nice to be back on here to visit about some of these ongoings with our program.
Right.
You guys have a happy Thanksgiving over at the Stones family?
We did. It was very happy. Uh, had some folks here. Got to see my folks the past couple of days and watched a lot of football. Um, have been, you know, I feel like for the most part, I have a healthy relationship with um, the Texas A&M forum, websites, your TexAgs, your 24/7, especially in season. I don't really get on there much.
Mm-hmm.
It's really more like to pass the time in the off season and read about recruiting and things like that. But in the midst of a season, I can see the games myself. I know what's going on, and what we're doing
Right.
bad, what we're doing good. But when it comes to a coaching search, this happens once every 5 or 6 years, and I'm just like addicted to it. And even though I know nothing's going to happen, I've got to see if someone knows someone that knows one of the boosters or something like that, and they're posting stuff on on Twitter or on one of the boards, I'm trying
Yeah.
to find all the little scoops that I can. But
Right.
I'm sure my wife's very happy that we hired somebody so I can not be not be on my phone so much.
Sure.
Um but they it's official. We did hire A&M did announce that Mike Elko will be the next head coach at A&M. He's the 30th head coach in our program. I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, was here with Jimbo for 4 years. They had a really strong run. He's done some nice things at Duke. We Chase, we haven't had you on since the Jimbo firing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you're kind of your takeaways from Jimbo being let go to today and hiring Mike Elko.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. I wished I could have gotten on that week because I had a lot to say about Jimbo's firing, but I'll keep it concise. I would say that um, I really was a Jimbo supporter. I really wanted Jimbo to succeed at A&M. I had hoped that maybe he would come in. I just felt like he fit our program so well, and like he just looked like Texas A&M. He talked like
Right.
it. He sounded like it. He brought a swagger to our program that was like almost a legitimized swagger, and so I thought, well, that's cool, and um, it just felt like he fit our program the way that Les Miles fit LSU and the way that Bama fit or Saban fit at Bama and Dabo Sweeney at Clemson. Like that's what I was hoping might come from the Jimbo Fisher era. That when you thought of Jimbo Fisher, you thought of A&M.
Yeah.
And it probably will be, but for different reasons now. Just it'll all be about money, I guess. But
Sure.
so for him to not succeed was saddening for me. I hated that because I thought he was a cool guy. I really wished him well, but he didn't. And so at some point we have to understand, okay, if we're going to invest this kind of money in something, we've got to have those expectations. And it became very blatant the last 2 seasons that
Yeah.
his his way his way of doing things, the way in which we do things or whatever
And
he
how
was
and how he
saying,
does them.
it just it wasn't working, and it just doesn't live up to this current climate in college football, and we needed a change, and I uh, I applaud our leadership for making a change because It was kind of a weird spot for them to be in. Do we, you know, pay this massive buyout and move on to the next coach? I, like many others, would probably say I don't think the buyout was ever the problem. It's a matter of who do we hire, and so that gets
Right.
us to where we are right now, right? Where I said from the very beginning of Jimbo Fisher's hiring, and even I'll say it to today, where we're now hiring the next coach, that if we can't win with Jimbo Fisher, who can we win with? That's been my belief ever since we hired him, because that was such a huge splash hire. Looking at everything over the course of this coaching search, I saw so many different names thrown out there of like big name coaches that when you would start reading the comments, everybody would be like, why would they want to go to A&M? Why would they want to go to A&M? It's like, this is exact same thing that everybody was saying about Jimbo once upon a time, if he would never leave Florida State to go there. And so you read the same things about Ryan Day and Lanning and DeBoer and all these different coaches and Deion Sanders. For some reason, I don't think we ever even looked at him, but
No,
he put his own name into the hat, I believe, just
yeah.
for his own whatever.
And Lane Kiffin.
And Lane Kiffin, yeah. So my thought process still exists today that, hey, if we can't win with Jimbo Fisher, when we've got all the tools, we've got the best recruiting class in history, and our best team on paper that we've ever had in A&M football history, especially modern day football history, and we've got the coach, we've got the facilities, we've got everything. If we can't win with a big name coach like Jimbo, who can we win with? And that's it was always kind of scary to me, because that meant like, oh crap, if he fails, then would this be the epitome of A&M football? Are we never going to see a national championship? Is it going to be like that? And that's possible, right? Like we can't neglect that reality, that it is possible that we never get there. But obviously as sports fans, we hope that we will get there. And so I kind of brought that same attitude into this coaching search of, really as soon as Jimbo was fired, it's like there is not going to be a name out there that is going to supersede, that is going to make us feel like we did about Jimbo when we hired Jimbo. It just won't happen, because we experienced that 6 years ago of like, oh my gosh, we got Jimbo Fisher. And then now there's not very many names in college football that are bigger than Jimbo Fisher. And if there are people that aren't going to be leaving to come to this program because they've got a great thing built or whatever. And so no matter who you hire, even if it's a great coach, it's not going to be a splash hire. It's not going to be something that everybody's, hooting and hollering about. It's not going to be anything. It's going to be, there are going to be pundits out there saying that, well, was this a good move by A&M to fire Jimbo Fisher to hire Mike Elko? Like you're going to get that kind of stuff, and that kind of reporting is going to continue. But for me, I looked at it as, okay, what coach I want to come in here is one that I know has been a proven coach, not a coach of the year coach, right? Because I've seen, and you could attest to this, Will, because you were just saying about how much you love coaching searches. I've seen you watch other coaching searches outside of just A&M, and you get all into them, and you can attest to it just the way I can. I've seen it when Tom Herman was the number one name, and then I've seen it when, Kevin Sumlin was the number one name, and Dave Aranda was the number one name, and, Sark was the number one name. And so like, there's all these, every year there's the number one name in college football. And how many of them actually pan out to be a really extremely good head coach? Not all of them. In fact, I'd say probably like 10% of them end up like lasting the test of time. Maybe they're good for a couple of years, but
and there's ones that do pan out that you don't expect to. Like
Mhm.
When Oregon hired Dan Lanning, I was like, oh, I mean, like the DC at Georgia, that's fine. Like Kirby runs that defense. This, I mean, I'm sure he's a fine coach, but I wasn't expecting much. He's got that thing absolutely rolling right now. Like they've struck gold with him, and like you just never know. And I think that's what that's something that I wanted to see with this. Like I didn't want the hot name, like
Mhm.
people would throw out Dabo Swinney or Deion Sanders or Urban Meyer. And I'm like, I don't want any part of any of that,
I
like
know.
I don't like everyone thinks that, A&M, like A&M did make waves, obviously like huge waves when they hired Jimbo Fisher with, 75 million guaranteed over 10 years and then, upped it to 90 or whatever it was. Um, like we're not going to do that every single time we go try to hire a coach. Like for one for one thing, we're already on the hook for that for the rest of that contract. We're like, we have plenty of money, but we're just not going to go and up Dabo Swinney's pay to 12 million over 12 years or something crazy like that. Like
Right.
that's just not realistic. And I think what this program needs is just a really really smart football coach
Mhm.
and someone that can build out the infrastructure and like we don't need the flashy, headline grabbing name.
Mhm.
Like I'm sick of being in headlines. It's usually for bad reason. So,
Right.
if we go under the radar a little bit with Mike Elko, I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, admittedly, I don't know all that much about all the. There's plenty of coaches out there that I don't even know their names. I don't really know much about them, what their history was, all of that, and you'll see their program start to take off, and you're like, wait, I didn't know who that coach was. He was the offensive line coach once upon a time. Look at them; they're doing really good, and
Yeah.
so I mean that happens, and it's gonna continue to happen, and that's kind of what I envision or hope for Elko, right? Because I'm hopeful that he'll be one of the future coaches, and I think that's kind of where I'm at currently is, hey, we need somebody who can come in, be a good football coach, because you don't have to get somebody to come and just completely restart. We don't need to restart. If we can hold on to some of the guys that we've got and just kind of keep on what we've got going, that, at least recruiting wise, that's a good place to be. Like
Yeah.
let's kind of continue that. Let's have a little bit of um, continuity there, and so with recruiting and NIL especially, I'm kind of thinking, I don't see the benefit whenever we have such a talented roster to just gut the whole coaching program. I don't see the benefit of that,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of where, um, and I know that you would say, well, you're not hiring a coach for this year's team, you're hiring it for down the road, and I don't disagree, but at the same time, you know, we we've got a good enough team right now that you could hire a coach and they could be good next year, you know,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and you don't have to have a 4-year rebuilding phase, because we didn't wait until someone, or I mean, not someone, Freudian slip.
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
we didn't wait until Jimbo was on, his Sumlin trajectory
Like
where
on the
suddenly
downhill.
everything's going downhill
Yeah.
before we fired him. We got him out of there at probably the peak of what he was going to be. But we waited one more year and we would have been, we would have been
Exactly.
losing recruits and all of that. So
Yeah.
I think we played our cards right. We did it at the right time. And I, for one, have wanted Elko the entire time. He was the number one name that I had. I've watched him at Duke. I've followed him at Duke the whole time. He has made Duke look like a really good program, and in short order. And that's a, I don't know, are they considered Ivy League? I mean, it's a very
Like
high
very.
prestigious basketball
Yeah.
school that it's a lot harder to recruit there. It's a lot
Yeah.
harder to um, get good players. So what that means is if you could take a team at Duke and then they can start winning the way that they've been winning, and then you're looking at coaching development, not necessarily getting in better players to fix whatever you've got going on. And I
Yeah.
think that's to me that has been missing since 2021. And who has been missing since 2021 is Mike Elko. So
Yeah.
to me, in the good portions of Jimbo Fisher's tenure at A&M, when he had Mike Elko, that's whenever we were performing like we should. And whenever Mike Elko left, it seemed like there has been a slack off there. And
Yeah,
I'm not saying that I'm not giving Mike Elko all the credit to that. I'm just
sure.
saying that the coaching program seemed to be better back then. And that tells me, like, I guess if you were talking to me about maybe moving Durkin up to head coach, I'd be like, I don't know
Yeah,
about that.
yeah,
Like, did you not see what just happened the past 2 years? Like, I
right.
just don't really want him to be a head coach. You're like, look, you're you're taking a coaching. You just fired the head coach, and then you're going to promote from within. That doesn't make any sense. Um, so I just don't feel like Elko counts because
Yeah.
he wasn't part of the bad part of Jimbo's tenure. He was part of the good part of Jimbo's tenure.
Well, and go back in time to, we talked about this recently, but like back when you and I were in school, and shortly thereafter in the Sumlin era, our defense struggled to stop anybody.
Hmm.
Especially in 13 and 14, and they got a little bit better, when we had Miles Garrett and those guys, but still, like we never were a premier defensive team.
Yeah.
Um, and Elko got here in year one and had a top 3 rushing defense, like just like with the same guys. Like that was pre-transfer portal, pre like all that stuff. Like he took, Dalen Mack and Kingsley Kiki, and Otaro Alaka and Tyrell Dotson, and turned them into a top 3, defense against the run, which is great in this league and in football in general. Um, and then in 4 years, I saw a stat in the 4 years he was here, when Jimbo and the offense spotted him 30 points, we never lost. Like if our offense would score 30 points in a game, we won all those games because our defense would hold teams under that most of the time.
Yeah.
And like especially in his last year here in 2021, that defense was championship level. Michael Clemens, DeMarvin Leal, Aaron Hansford, Jaden Peavy, Damani, like all those guys, and Leon, like that, like
Hmm.
that was a great defense, like top 5 defense in the country, and that was kind of the culmination of his 4 years here, and teaching that to those guys, and like honestly, we probably have more talent on defense now than we had then. So
Yeah.
um, that's what really excites me. Like I can't sit here and promise, like no, there's no coach that's a sure thing. Like Saban was not a sure thing when they hired him, or even when LSU hired him, or like back in the day, and Kirby wasn't a sure thing either at Georgia. But I can almost guarantee you that as long as Elko's here, A&M's not going to field a bad defense. I feel pretty confident saying that.
Well, and that's where, like, philosophically, right? You have your head coaches that are defensive minded, your head coaches that are offensive minded. I am a believer in the defensive minded head coach, especially in today's day in college football, because like you take an offensive minded head coach like a Jimbo, and they're constantly looking for a better defensive coordinator. And every now and then they'll get a Mike Elko or all of that. And alternatively, if you've got a defensive minded head coach like Saban's always the example there, right? But you can get in offensive coordinators inside and out. I mean, think about how many offensive coordinators or how many offensive minded coaches are out there right now, that you could go and get.
Yeah.
Now name me 10 high level defensive coaches that you would love to have. And so like I would use the comparison of Dabo Sweeney versus Brent Venables. Look at their 2 programs right now. Look at how Clemson was when they were together, right? But look at OU and look at Clemson today, and that is kind of my viewpoint. Now it's a biased viewpoint, but I believe when you get a defensive minded head coach, if your offense isn't working out, then get you a new offensive coordinator because there's 1,000 of them out there.
Right.
There's not 1,000 really good defensive coordinators out there, and so that's where I I believe it starts like that. And if we can create an identity of a football program that's built on a solid defense, which we kind of already have built over the last 6 years, for the most part, thanks to Mike Elko, you know, then that then creates a place where we can get some good offensive coordinators in here and we can win some games.
Yeah.
And that's where, when we look back over the last 2 years and how terrible, we went, you know, total 12-12 over the last 2 years, right? Last two seasons. And so, when we're looking at that, wonderful. We're
Yeah.
we're we're at 500 for that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But all of those games were, most of them, within a touchdown or a field goal,
Yeah.
and it's just minor changes that we've needed all along. And that's where, if you as a head coach can be more adaptable, that's what we said all of Jimbo's time frame on the offense. He wouldn't relinquish control of the offense, and look
Yeah.
what it did to us. Look what it did to us. And defense is kind of one of those things that I just you can relinquish some control there and be okay, because you can't helicopter parent over a defense like you can on an offense. And
Yeah.
um and so I don't think we run into the same problem that we've had in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's that's probably that's probably my biggest takeaway is um even when Elko left, like our defense was okay last year. It's been pretty awesome this year. Like outside of uh, a couple games here, like Miami obviously was not great.
Oh
Uh,
no, we had a great defense this year.
yeah,
Yeah.
especially in the front seven,
Hmm.
and and Jimbo being an offensive guy just was not going to be able to figure out the offensive side of the ball. Like it's ingrained. Like he's is you know unfortunately he's as stubborn as they get, and like
Hmm.
it's his offense, and he's gonna you know try to keep trying to make it work, and maybe it'll work again someday somewhere else. But um what I like about Elko is you know he's already shown us proof of concept of doing what we would like to see done here. Is he got to Duke, went and hired a really innovative offensive coordinator in Kevin Johns. He might bring him over, he might not. We might hire somebody else, but he was perfectly fine bringing in someone to run the offense and not messing with it. He's like, "Hey, man,"
Right.
he's like, "Hey, I think he brought in Kevin Johns. He's like, "Hey, I think you're a great offensive mind. Offense is yours. Do with it like what you see fit." And they've had some great offense. Like when their quarterback has been healthy over there at Duke, that's some great offenses. And obviously
Hmm.
their defense has been really stout with Elko at the helm. So um, that's what's interesting to me is who like as far as the money goes. Like Elko was only making like 3.5 million at Duke. We haven't seen what he's going to be making here yet. I'm sure it'll be a sizable amount, but having that extra cash to go and target a really really big time offensive coordinator or someone that he's is really comfortable with. Um, I'm interested to see where that goes, but
Hmm.
I think I've got Duke's team composite rating here in terms of team talent, and they are 67th in the country out of 130 whatever it is. A&M is fourth. We're fourth. We have 5 losses, and
That's
it's just
crazy.
it's not acceptable. And like obviously it's not. We made a change, so a guy like Elko, or really there's a dozen coaches we could have hired, and I've been like, hey, this is great. Like we have a really smart guy, X's and O's, program kind of guy, and they can come in here with what we have and do some great things. And Elko is near the top of that list. Like he is shown to have already done more with less. He did it here when he first got here, and then he did more with more.
Hmm.
Now he gets to come back here with as much talent as we've ever had. And really go to work. So it's a really exciting opportunity.
No, I agree. I want to mention briefly the our true 30th head coach. I guess Mike can be considered our 31st, but uh, our for a brief stint, we had hired Stoops for our head coach, and so if you were awake last night or on Aggie
Man,
Twitter, you've
it took us
probably
25
seen
minutes
this.
to even bring that up.
Yeah,
Whoops.
but I wanted to mention it because I think Mark Stoops is a good coach. I think he is. I would have been happy with him at A&M, but I think I mean, admittedly, I was a bit disappointed whenever I read it, simply because to me he's very similar to Mike Elko, and so I'm like the two coaches are very very similar. The only difference is Elko knows this place. He knows the players. He knows, all this kind of he knows our program already. And
Yeah.
he's not starting from scratch. He's starting with a leg up on the competition. He can get to work right away, where Stoops would be starting from scratch, and he would really be. Now, could he work it up that way? I think so. But I picture him at Kentucky. He has done great things at Kentucky. I think he's a good coach. But I wonder, could he do? I think he would be about the same here as he's been at Kentucky, and I just don't foresee Kentucky getting to that last step. I think Kentucky's kind of where we're at, and I just don't see that happening. So for me, I'm like, well, if we're gonna hire him, we might as well have hired Coach Elko. There's no difference between those two in terms of like the type of coach, caliber of coach, if you will. I just don't think he's that big of a step up from Elko, and so for me personally, if I had to choose between the two, I'm choosing Elko, and so whenever it was announced that he was going to be our next head coach, that was my thought process of like, man, I would have much rather had Elko than him. And somehow 24 hours later that's happened. So I have no idea what I said or what I wished for, but I'm glad that it did.
Yeah. So. You and every other A&M fan, it appears.
Seems like the collective intelligence amongst us all.
Never like when that happened, I didn't really know what to say on Twitter because I try to not like bash the university or bash the program when they do things that I may not agree with, but that was pretty much unanimous, like total outrage from every single A&M person that I know. Like nobody was happy about it. So, and honestly, like I'm with you. I think Stoops is a good coach. But if I'm taking a shot on, who can we like, I said this recently on on an article for this British newspaper lately, where I think someone found our podcast. This British writer found our podcast on Twitter. And he's like, "Hey, can you talk about Jimbo for 30 minutes?" I tried to explain to people in England what about college football, but like trying to justify paying that much money to buy out Jimbo Fisher and hire a new coach. I equated it to buying lottery tickets. Like, hey, we pushed all our chips in on Jimbo, and that didn't go the way we wanted. But we're not just going to stop trying to be good. Like you're going to go out and try another guy and try a, it's like buying a lottery ticket, or buying a Powerball ticket in Mike Elko. Like, hey, you've done some things that we really like. Maybe you'll be great, maybe you won't be, but let's try it. Let's do it. Let's see how that works out. And if you're going to roll the dice and buy that lottery ticket, I'd rather do it with Elko than Stoops. I think he's a decade younger. He's been here, he's recruited here, and this isn't the end all be all, but the current players love him, which is great. He's probably got some good relationships with the coaches in the state, which is always a good thing. So, I get a little annoyed when anyone that's coached at A&M gets brought up for a job here, and people are like, "Oh, you're just like him because he coached here." Blah blah blah. Like, that's not the reason why. Like, it's not like there's some. I think people think it's like a good old boy thing. Like, oh well, like let's go get Elko. He was our coach before. Like, we'll just make him head coach. Like, I don't think it boils down just to that. Like, that's making it way too simple. But I think there are some positives of him having been here, him he was on the staff when we recruited that #1 class, and like
Mhm.
a lot of that was on defense, and he played a big role with Bryce Anderson and some guys like that.
Well, I mean,
He's
it was mainly defense. And
Yeah,
how could your defensive coordinator not play some role in every defensive guy that signs with you? You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like you've got to have some sort of, now he might not be the lead recruiter on them, but he's going to have some sort of connection with them, you know?
yeah.
And so I think it would be cool to see him come back and I'd love for him to bring Santucci back with him. But I would like to see that reunite as well.
Well,
Um,
and maybe biggest of all, we haven't talked about this guy yet, but I can almost guarantee you he's going to keep Elijah Robinson on staff.
well, that's I implied that, so thank you for saying it out
Okay.
loud. Like Santucci, Elijah Robinson, and him, for the three of them. If we could reunite the three of them, I would be very happy with that.
Yeah.
And would love that you know progression there. And um, so I mean, if you have that, then it's almost like we're just going through a coordinator search at that point. You know, it's
Yeah.
almost like we
Yeah,
didn't
it
even
honestly
go
is.
through a head coaching change. And so like that's what I think is kind of cool about it. I mean, I put myself in these shoes. You know, think about it from this perspective. Let's say you're working a job and you're second in command and you're going to all these meetings with your boss. You know, there's going to be things that you're learning from your boss that you implement, and if maybe you go to the competitor or whatever, there's going to also be things that you then say like, man, if I had that job, I would do this differently, I would do that differently, I would do this differently. And so for him to have worked under Jimbo, he probably knows more about what went wrong
Yeah,
with Jimbo's staff than we do.
yeah,
So
for sure.
for us to look at it and be like, man, we need a new head coach. He was probably looking at it saying, man, they need a new head coach, and so he knows more about why things were going wrong within than we will ever know. And that's a good thing because that means he can come in and he can say, hey, I'm not even gonna I'm not even going to approach these, or I'm going to do this a lot better. I'm going to avoid this problem that we had once before,
Yeah.
and he can learn from the last coaching staff's mistakes because he experienced them. That's a unique position to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, I think that is very valuable, and not that he was sitting there going like when he's got a top 5 defense going like, man, like our offense is so bad, like he wasn't doing that, but he was, like he was in like, he was able to see the things that were working and maybe things that we struggled with,
Yeah.
and now he gets to come back. He's like, oh, like I've already been here and done that. I can, I've already got things in my mind that I want to implement, and he can go out and do it. Um, an interesting name that I realized is on his staff over there at Duke. His cornerbacks coach is Ishmael Aristide, if you remember that name.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
he he was I think he was a GA here or some kind of like an analyst here,
Hmm.
and I remember all the recruits really liked him. Like he was like a big up and comer in the recruiting world,
Yeah.
and he left to go somewhere else. Like it looks like he's reunited with Elko at Duke. Would love to have him back. I mean, at this point, you know, you've got Elko, you've got Elijah. We'll see about Santucci and who he, and who else on the current staff will will be asked to stay. Who they target as OC, but then it's like like which of these guys can recruit, like go
Hmm.
out and get some guys that can get it done on the trail, because I feel like Jimbo's first staff, like you had guys like Tim Brewster, and obviously Elijah was an up and comer, and they really did some work in recruiting. So I'm interested to see, and then even beyond that, how does he go about building out his like his organizational structure. Like he's going to
Hmm.
be like the CEO of Aggie football, basically. Who's going to be his player personnel guy? Who's going to be a strength coach? And those kinds of things. And how does he want to structure it? So I think what we used to have was it was just I don't want to say dictatorship because that implies that it was very negative. Maybe it was. I don't really know, but like it started and stopped with Jimbo. He made all the calls and did all the things.
Well,
What?
I know that he took recruiting very seriously and
Yeah.
was like almost obsessed with it. Jimbo, I mean, and so for him, um, it was like almost like a personal thing, like
Right.
he had to do it and he had to be involved with it, and so he didn't relinquish as much control. He didn't delegate as much. But then we saw the same thing happen whenever he's trying to call plays. Like he wouldn't relinquish that control. And so I think in the modern context of college football, where you have constant 24/7 recruiting, and you have NIL deals going every which way. You got the transfer portal. You've got all of this, and then you have to coach the football team. Like I think you need to delegate more and more and more.
Yeah.
And if I'm a coach like Coach Elko, I'm looking at probably Coach Fisher and saying, I don't want anything like that. That's way too much to try to do all of that. I'm going to hire somebody that's in charge of this, and I'm going to hire somebody in charge of that. And yeah, but on the recruiting front, if you talk now, this is wishful thinking, right? But I didn't realize Ish Aristide was part of that. If he came as well, and you reunited those four guys, those were four of our like best recruiters back then.
Yeah.
And so like now all of a sudden we have all of our best recruiters back, and minus Jimbo. Well, okay, go get you a good recruiting offensive staff and watch out. Like it's almost as if
Go
nothing
go
stopped.
and go and get what's his name? Samples at Arizona State.
Yeah, there you go.
Like if you get him in here, like you can actually get kids from Duncanville for once. Like
Mm-hmm.
like we've never been able to do that. Like Duncanville, North Shore,
Yeah,
and get back into DeSoto. Yeah, like go out and get some guys that are young, up and coming, and can recruit really well. That's what. Yeah, like it becomes a coaching search, and now it's a assistant search. Like we're all
yeah,
going to be looking at like who are we targeting, who are we going after, like who does Elko want to bring in here, and at this point, like he's going to have a blank check to go out and say, hey, you know, um, I'm back at A&M. I'm trying to build this thing out. We can do something really special here, and go out and sell that to coaches. So,
yeah,
it's a super exciting proposition, and that right there, that whole broader part of it, the whole organizational structure, delegating some of those tasks and things to other people, and hiring a really strong support staff. Uh, that so that by itself, along with bringing in someone to run a more modern offense, I think that right there gives me hope that this can be a 10+ win program going forward. Like
yeah,
we've done 8-4 with without those things. Now if we bring in Elko, I've got a feeling he's gonna modernize things a little bit. And as long as he can keep up the influx of talent, which I believe he can, um, go hit the portal and bring some of those guys, and bring in some guys at positions of need. There's no reason to think this can't work and be really successful.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, we didn't want to go too long. We're under an hour, which is rare for any show that we do. But all in all, I mean, it's hard. Like I don't like giving out any kind of coaching grades or things like that. I'll just say that I'm pleased with what we did. With the S show from last night, notwithstanding. Like I wasn't crazy that we had to go through that, but I saw someone today that said we took the longest possible route to end up at the easiest solution. but but hey, at least we got here, right?
That's right.
But no, I think his introductory press conference is tomorrow, so definitely tune into that, and we'll be on Twitter talking about that. But yeah, I mean it's like we said earlier, it had to be done. The talent on this team is still hitting its apex, and there's renewed hope and, and renewed optimism in the A&M program.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. I think, I mean, like, he's who I wanted all along, and it's simply because, I don't think that we need to be focused on the name. I think we need to be focused on, you know, is the proof in the pudding, and he seems like, even though of course the connection with A&M, he's just an under radar kind of, great coach that's out there. I felt like he was under the radar the whole time he was at our school, and he'd get calls from different programs asking them, and I'm thinking like, man, he'd make a great Power Five head coach, and then finally Duke let him get there. So
Yeah,
glad to have him back, and glad to see who he ends up with. I really hope that he holds on to Rob. That's the main coach. I think all Aggies want to see kept.
yeah,
But
for sure.
these others that we mentioned that coached with him at Duke, they may not come with him. That's fine. But they're at least options, and so now
Yeah,
now we start exploring those options. So I'm looking
yeah,
forward to the Elko era, and we'll see where that leads us.
yeah. Me too. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, I I think we mentioned earlier, you shouldn't base your hire off of who the players want or who the players like, but with everything, with all the other positives we talked about in this episode, it is a huge positive that the guys here, especially the guys on defense, really do like him.
For
And
sure.
I think that could affect some possible NFL decisions. A guy like Fidel Diggs, like this was his fourth season. He's played pretty well. You think, hey, does a guy like that, does he want to go and try his luck in the NFL, or come back and make one more run at it? With a guy like Elko, you probably convince him to stay. And obviously, I have no inside info here, but like he tweeted out, he was happy with the hire. Um, a guy like Shamar Turner who played well, can you convince him to come back?
Yeah.
I think Adrian Cooper, like he's definitely gone. Like he's going to go very high in the NFL draft. Super excited for him. But a lot of these other guys, like and I think obviously Damani can't return, but I think all the other safeties, that Elko coached and recruited, I bet they're excited about it. And
It would definitely give me pause if I was a player that, you know, going into the last few games, I'm like, I'm gonna declare next year and that'll be fine. What then all of a sudden, oh hey, I got my old coach back. Like, no, yeah, I'm gonna stay. Like I mean, it would excite me, I feel like. But
yeah, yeah.
one thing I'll mention is that we're gonna need a new intro outro because
Oh yeah, yeah.
they done yet.
They done. I think that was the first thing we mentioned when me and Robert got on here. I was like, well, we're not done, but Jimbo is.
Yeah. They done.
So I've got to go rework something for this episode, but yeah, I might take some clips from Elko's conference tomorrow, try to work that in or something. But
Yeah.
definitely, if I had my pour one out soundbite, we'd be pouring one out for the old intro.
Uh, we might
Oh,
might just search some old Elko press conferences, see if we can hear him say "Giga Maggies" or something like that, and
yeah,
just go
yeah,
with
yeah,
that. So,
yeah,
well, like you said, he'll probably say it tomorrow. So,
yeah.
um,
Well, and Jimbo never let the guys talk to the media, so there's not a whole lot of content there with Elko
true,
from
true.
his time here. Well, yeah. Once again, I appreciate you guys listening. This has renewed. Like I wasn't sure what this podcast was going to be in the off season, if it was going to be a lame duck kind of year, and just being a fan in general. But obviously this has renewed things a lot, and a change had to be made. We made it. I think we made a good decision here. There's going to be the the portal opens up in about a week. Uh, there's still early signing day and recruiting to be done. There's going to be coaches hired. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on, and we're going to be right here. Probably once a week for the time being to keep you guys up to date and break it all down. But um, as always, appreciate your listenership. Make sure to like, subscribe, uh, tell your friends, all that kind of stuff. Check us out on YouTube. Spotify, Apple, X, all that good stuff. But he is Chase Caldwell. I'm Will Stone. This is the Ineligibles Podcast. We will see you next week.